Why do some people seem invincible while others shatter at a single word, a failure, or a cold glance? Carl Jung believed the reason is not that they are stronger, but that they understand themselves better. While most people spend their lives avoiding the dark corners within, truly strong individuals step right into them without fear, without judgment, only with one desire to understand themselves. Carl Jung once said that our lives are guided by the unconscious, and until we illuminate it, we will call our tragedies fate. But fate is not a binding chain. It is a mirror reflecting what we have not yet dared to confront. Every burst of anger, every wound is a call, an invitation to enter the inner world where all true human power is stored. To build a mind so strong that others must tread carefully around it, you don't need to appear cold or indifferent. You need to become awakened, deep enough to understand yourself, calm enough not to be shaken. When you touch that power, you no longer need to prove anything to anyone because your presence itself is a declaration. And that is what we will explore today. How to build a mind so strong that it instills fear in others. A mind that does not waver before praise, does not collapse before injury, does not lose itself amid the storms of the world. Because when you understand the true origin of inner strength, you will realize that no one can hurt you unless you grant them that power. You don't need to fight anyone, you only need to awaken. As usual, I have a small challenge for you. Watch the video to the end. If you are truly serious about your journey of self-development, leave a comment. I accept the challenge, or more briefly, accept challenge to start with the first part of today's video. Part 1, Recognizing the Shadow. Part 1, Recognizing the Shadow. There is a part of you that you always try to avoid. The part that makes you ashamed, makes you angry, makes you feel not good enough. You suppress it, pretend it doesn't exist, and don the mask of positivity, strength, or kindness. But the paradox is that this very part you are fleeing from holds your true power. Carl Jung called it the shadow. Jung once said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The shadow is not something evil. It is simply the rejected portion of the soul. Everything you don't want to acknowledge about yourself. Envy, anger, fear, the need for control, the craving for recognition, or even the weakness you deny. Every time you say, 'That's not me,' you are pushing another fragment of yourself into the darkness. And then that shadow grows, devours your will, and begins to control you from within without you even realizing it. Think about the times you lost your temper over a small remark, envied someone's success, or felt irritated when others received attention. It's not because they did something wrong. It's your shadow projecting outward. You only get angry because you see in them a part of yourself that you haven't accepted. You deny it in silence, but it remains there, whispering through emotional reactions, impulsive words, and unconscious choices. And if you don't look it straight in the face, it will control you like a puppet that believes itself free. Pause here for a moment. Don't rush past. Close your eyes for a few seconds and recall the last time you got angry, felt small, or experienced envy. Try asking yourself, which part of me is speaking through this emotion? If you are brave enough not to evade that question, you have just taken the first step on the journey to seeing yourself. So recognizing the shadow is not a pleasant process. It is like looking in the mirror and seeing not only your familiar face, but also the distorted parts, the cracks, the forms you once denied. But it is precisely there, in that raw honesty, that power is born, because you cannot master what you do not dare to confront. Imagine walking through a forest and hearing a strange noise. You fear it because you don't know what it is. But when you dare to hold up a light and shine it, you realize it's just the wind through the branches. Your inner shadow is the same. When you haven't seen it, it makes you tremble. When you dare to look, it loses its power. Recognizing the shadow is the first step to reclaiming control of your own mind. Someone might ask, but why touch that dark part? Why not just focus on the positive? Because light has no meaning if you have never known what darkness is. Fake positivity is just another way to evade reality. Truly strong people are not those who are always cheerful, but those who dare to touch the pain and learn to listen to the message hidden within it. The darkness does not come to destroy you. It comes to show you what remains unhealed. For example, when you feel hurt because someone abandons you, the real pain does not lie in their action, but in your long-standing fear of abandonment, perhaps from childhood when you are not truly heard. The shadow stores those memories, and every time a similar situation arises, it wakes up to remind you that the wound is still there. If you evade it, it will repeat endlessly. If you look it straight in the eye, it will gradually dissolve. In Jungian psychology, the journey of confronting the shadow is not a battle to eradicate the dark part, but a journey of integration to let light and darkness coexist in balance. Because without darkness, you cannot have depth. A person who only knows light becomes shallow and fragile because they do not understand the true nature of humanity. But one who has faced the shadow becomes serene, profound, and steadfast because they no longer fear themselves. Jung believed that each person has the potential to become whole when they unify the two sides of themselves. Such a person is not easily provoked, not easily manipulated, because they know who they are and who they can become. They see anger, but do not let it dominate. They feel fear, but do not let it halt their steps. They do not try to become better than others, but only strive to become more true to themselves. Look at the people you once considered strong. They may not be the type who always smile or display constant positivity, but you sense in them an admirable stillness, as if they have traversed dark regions you have not yet dared to touch. They don't need to prove anything because they know true strength does not lie in defeating others, but in mastering the demons within. That is why Jung called recognizing and reconciling with the shadow the first step of awakening. You cannot build a strong mind if your foundation is fear, and you cannot become unshakable if you are still fleeing from the dark part of yourself. True strength does not come from accumulating knowledge or discipline, but from the courage to confront what you do not want to see. When you begin to look at the shadow, you will find it is not only frightening but full of vitality. Within it lie the parts you once neglected: passion, creative instinct, primal courage, powerful intuition. All that was once suppressed now awaits release. Recognizing the shadow is not just facing fear, but unlocking the greatest potential within you. And then one day when someone tries to hurt you, when the world hurls criticism, judgment, or contempt at you, you will smile. Not because you feel nothing, but because you know exactly who is speaking in your mind. The wounded part, the fearful part, or the healed part. When you know that, no one can manipulate your emotions anymore. Part 2. Overcoming the victim. Part 2. Overcoming the victim archetype. When you realize that the fears, angers, and weaknesses within are not enemies, but mirrors reflecting human nature, another truth will gradually emerge. You realize that much of the pain you have endured does not come from circumstances, but from the role you unconsciously choose for yourself. That is the role of the victim. Jung called this an archetype, a deep psychological pattern existing in the collective unconscious. And the victim is one of the most powerful archetypes governing human life. The victim archetype is not a foreign concept. You see it everywhere in the person who constantly complains that life is unfair, in the one who always blames the past, parents, society, love, or fate. And sometimes you see it in yourself when you say, "I can't. I would have been different if not for." The victim archetype is very subtle because it cloaks itself in the garb of legitimacy. It makes you believe you are merely the injured party, that everything that happens is someone else's fault. But behind that is a cold truth. When you cast yourself as the victim, you also strip yourself of the power to master your own life. Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become, but to choose, you must be conscious." And that consciousness only comes when you dare to look at how the victim archetype is manipulating you. Because no one is truly a victim forever. Only someone who has not yet realized they could stand up. In analytical psychology, Jung believed that every archetype has two faces, the light and the dark. The victim archetype in its light face helps us recognize pain, empathize, and awaken compassion. But in its dark face, it turns us into dependence on our own suffering. We begin to live through trauma, seeking attention, pity, or validation from others to fill the inner void. It makes us confuse suffering with proof of existence, and that is when the shadow of the victim devours our true self. You can see this in those who have been betrayed, and then carry a deep belief that everyone will leave me. They build walls to protect themselves, but unwittingly imprison themselves in isolation, or in those who have failed once and then never dare to try again because they believe life is not for me. They think they are defending themselves, but in reality they are protecting their own cage, and that cage is built not from steel, but from distorted beliefs about the self. Carl Jung called this identification with the archetype, when a person no longer knows where the self ends and the role begins. You are no longer the one experiencing pain. You become the pain itself, and when that happens, you lose the ability to transform. Jung believed that the prerequisite for escaping the archetype's grip is to become conscious of being gripped by it. Because only when you recognize I am playing the victim, can you begin to rewrite the script. A friend of mine who works in an advertising company always complained to me that she felt her boss favored others. Every time someone else got a big project, she would get angry and think, they never value me. But one day, instead of continuing to complain, Lan paused and asked herself, why am I not getting big projects? What can I do differently? She began proactively suggesting ideas, seeking feedback, and taking responsibility for her work. The way she stepped out of the abandoned role changed everything. The sense of helplessness vanished when Lan realized true power begins with stopping the blame and choosing action. So, the answer to the question how to break free will not be by denying the pain or forcing yourself to be stronger, but by dialoguing with the emotions. Try looking straight at the voice in your head every time you think negatively. Ask it, who is speaking like this? You will realize it is not you. It is the inner child within you, once abandoned, once unheard, believing that only through suffering would it receive attention from others. And when you begin to listen to that child with empathy instead of judgment, it will no longer need to scream. At that point, the victim archetype dissolves, making way for a new energy, the energy of the Creator. The Creator does not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" They ask, "What can I learn from this?" The very moment you shift from the first question to the second, you have left the victim role and entered the journey of mastery. For example, some people have endured poverty, abuse, or loss, but they do not let that past define them. They transform it into motivation to help others, to write a new story. They do not deny the pain. They transmute it into strength. Jung would call this the alchemical process of the soul, where lead suffering is turned into gold wisdom. But remember, overcoming the victim archetype does not mean becoming numb. Truly strong people are not those who never fall, but those who know how to rise and understand why they fell. They still feel hurt, but they are not defined by the hurt. They still know pain, but they choose conscious responses. That is the difference between reflex and freedom. From a Jungian perspective, every time you refuse the victim role, you move closer to the self, the center of the psyche, where all archetypes harmonize in balance. There you are no longer shaped by circumstances, but the one shaping them. You no longer seek a savior because you understand that you are the one who saves yourself. Try imagining if from tomorrow you stop saying, "I can't," and replace it with, "I choose not to do this right now." The second statement carries the same content, but holds power because it acknowledges that you have the right to choose, and that right to choose is the first step of inner freedom. All freedom begins with this realization: I am no longer a victim, and then you realize no one has ever truly hurt you. They only touched the wounds you have not yet healed. No one has ever taken your power. You only once forgot that it belongs to you. When you remember that when you stop playing the victim and return to being the creator of your own life, you need to prove nothing. The stillness within you is already proof of a strength that no one can shake. Part 3, Accessing the Collective Unconscious. Part 3, Accessing the Collective Unconscious. That is the door leading to a deeper layer of the mind, where not only you are present. There you realize that your fears, beliefs, dreams, and symbols that have appeared in your life do not entirely belong to you as an individual. They are the flow of thousands of years of human consciousness operating within you. Jung called that deep layer the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is not a mystical concept. It is the shared spiritual repository of humanity, where all experiences, memories, and primal emotions have accumulated across thousands of generations. Every human being is born inheriting this treasure trove, like a spiritual inheritance. You do not need to learn to fear the dark, to love the light, to tremble before beauty, or shiver at the face of death. It is all already programmed in the deepest recesses of your mind. And it is from that repository that archetypes form universal symbolic images that appear in dreams, myths, religions, and even in modern life today. You may never have read Greek mythology, yet you still understand the feeling of Prometheus, the one who dared to steal fire from the gods to give to humanity. Because deep in the collective unconscious, you too carry the archetype of the rebel, the challenger of limits in pursuit of the light of knowledge. You may never have encountered a figure like Athena, but you still recognize the archetype of the wise one within yourself when you choose reason over instinct. When you hold stillness amid chaos, the collective unconscious is what connects you to all of humanity, no matter the century or culture in which you live. It explains why a child anywhere fears the night, yearns to be loved, imagines heroes, mothers, and death. Those images do not come from the external world. They are the ancient language of the soul, the spiritual heritage you carry within. But the strange thing is most of us live our entire lives without ever touching this deep layer. We are trapped on the surface where reason, logic, and the ego hold sway. We think we are choosing, but in truth, the collective unconscious whispers behind every action, every emotion, every dream. You think you love someone because they fit, but deep down you may be guided by the archetype of the anima or animus, the unconscious image of the ideal feminine or masculine within. You think you want success to affirm your worth, but in reality, you are living the archetype of the hero, battling your own dragon to find the treasure, which Jung believed symbolizes self-realization. Understanding this is a turning point, because when you begin to see the archetypes operating within you, you are no longer their puppet. You start choosing how to express them consciously. For instance, the mother archetype might drive you to sacrifice yourself to exhaustion for others. But when you recognize it, you can transform that energy from blind sacrifice to compassion, from control to mindful care. Or the warrior archetype. If unconscious, it makes you aggressive, bent on victory at any cost. But when you master it, it becomes the strength to protect boundaries, to stand for what is right without being ruled by hatred. Within each person exist dozens of such archetypes. The teacher, the healer, the betrayer, the wanderer, the king, the warrior, the creator. They come and go, shifting with time and circumstance. The issue is not to eliminate them, but to learn to call upon the right one when needed. Like a skilled director, you do not let a single actor dominate the stage. You know when to let the warrior appear, when the healer needs to speak, when the wise one should lead. A strong mind does not try to control everything, but one that knows how to work with the unconscious rather than being controlled by it. An intriguing example in moments when you feel lost, unsure of who you are or what you live for. That is not a sign of failure, but a call from the collective unconscious. Like the heroes in myths, you are entering the dark night of the soul, where you must leave the safe confines of the ego to find your true self. At that deep level, you will encounter strange symbols in dreams: a forest, an old house, a guide, a snake, a stream. Do not dismiss them. Jung believed every dream symbol is a message from the unconscious, a map guiding the journey of awakening. And if in this moment an image, dream, or memory has just flickered into view, do not ignore it. Write it down or share it in the comments as a small fragment of the shared ocean we are exploring together. Because sometimes what you share is not just yours, but the whisper of the collective unconscious seeking to be seen through your very story. When you learn to listen to that symbolic language through dreams, intuition, and strange synchronicities, you begin to unlock the inner treasure. You no longer live solely by reason, but by the ancient wisdom of the collective soul. You realize you are not alone, for every story you are living has been told by humanity for thousands of years. You are merely rewriting them in your own way. Amid the clamor of the world, when you achieve this, you touch a power that logic cannot explain. An intelligence beyond the individual. Jung called it inner guidance. When you connect to this deep layer, your decisions no longer stem from fear or ambition, but from a profound knowing, as if your soul already knew the way. Try imagining you are a drop of water in the ocean. When you see yourself only as a small drop, you feel weak, isolated, and afraid. But when you realize you belong to the ocean, that the current within you is the current of the vast sea, you fear no more. That is the experience of touching the collective unconscious union with the spiritual source of humanity. When you live from that depth, you no longer react as a small individual. You act as part of something greater. And that is when your mind becomes as steadfast as a mountain. No one can shake you because you are no longer just you. You are the crystallization of thousands of years of wisdom. The voice of the collective unconscious made conscious. Part 4, The Journey of Individuation. The Pinnacle of Inner Strength. Part 4, The Journey of Individuation. The Pinnacle of Inner Strength. Here you enter the deepest and most sacred stage of the spiritual journey that Carl Jung called individuation. If accessing the collective unconscious connects you to humanity's shared wisdom, then the journey of individuation is the destination where all those parts merge into one. Individuation is not about becoming the best version of yourself, as the modern world preaches. It is the journey of returning to who you truly are, whole, unified, and authentic. Jung believed every person is born with a soul map, a unique path no one else can walk for them. But most of us spend our lives pleasing others, fitting into societal molds, becoming what the world expects. We build the ego as a mask for survival, gradually losing the call from deep within the call of the self, the total self. Jung said, the self is not a grander ego, but the true center of the entire person, where light and shadow, conscious and unconscious, individual and collective, harmonize into a unified whole. It is the place where you no longer tear yourself between I should and I want, between right and wrong, between what they think and who I am. When you touch that state, you no longer need to play any role. You become your soul itself. But that journey is not easy. To ascend, you must let go. Let go of the roles that once saved you from hurt, but now imprison you. Let go of the illusions about who you think you must become. The process of individuation is not accumulation, but divestment. Step by step, you peel away the layers that are not yours until only the original, pure, and most authentic essence remains. One on the path of individuation often goes through phases of crisis. At such times, you realize that the success, fame, or self-image you once pursued no longer suffices to define life's meaning. You begin seeking something deeper, wholeness, and it is precisely there that the journey of individuation begins. Try looking back at your life. How many times have you done something just because you should, must, or everyone does? How many times have you felt you were living without truly living, merely acting in a pre-written script? Jung believed those moments of restlessness are not failures, but the soul's call. The soul does not shout, it whispers, "This is not me." And when you are brave enough to listen, you begin returning to your true path, the path of individuation. On that journey, you will rediscover parts of yourself you once neglected. Perhaps the creativity is stifled by fear of failure. Perhaps the passion was extinguished by the pressures of practical life, or the deep intuition denied by reason. Each time you dare to listen and call them back, you are gradually integrating yourself, and the miracle is the more original you become, more deeply connected you feel to the world. Because only when you are truly yourself can you truly see others. In the collective unconscious, Jung observed that every culture tells of this journey. The hero's departure from home, confrontation with monsters, and return with treasure. But Jung emphasized that the treasure is not outside, it is within the hero. The monster you must face is not real enemy, but the fear, doubt, and old patterns in your own mind. And when you conquer them, the reward is not glory but awakening. Think of the artist who finds their unique style after years of copying others, or the one who collapses in crisis then rises to live an entirely different life, not for anyone else but because it feels this is me. That is the manifestation of individuation, not Everyone recognizes it, but every time you do something truly aligned with your soul, you draw closer to that pinnacle. Individuation does not make you perfect. It makes you real. You still have flaws, still have shadow, but you no longer fear them. You understand that shadow is not opposed to light. It is the indispensable part that gives light meaning. When you accept both, you attain wholeness, the highest state of the human psyche, and when you live from that place, everything changes. You are no longer driven by fear of loss, the need for acceptance, or the desire to prove yourself. You need not affirm your worth, for you are worth. You need not chase light, for you are the source. Jung believed that one who reaches this stage possesses an unshakable peace, a peace that inspires awe and caution in others, because they cannot fathom how you remain so steadfast in a chaotic world. That is the pinnacle of inner strength, when you no longer need to hide, control, or prove. You simply are, and in that state of being, you become strong naturally, like a mountain that needs no roar to proclaim its height. And when you arrive at that point, when you unify all parts of yourself into a coherent whole, you do not merely build a strong mind, you build an awakened mind, and that precisely is the pinnacle of inner strength, the strength of one who has passed through shadow, transcended the ego, touched the soul, and returned as an unshakable being. If what you have just heard quiets your mind, as if something within you is being called by name, hold this moment. With a like or subscribe, a silent promise to your own soul that you will continue the path back to your true self. This journey is not for the intellect, but for those brave enough to heed the deepest voice in their heart. And it is here that we enter the most essential part, training the mind. How to live with a strong, clear, and profound mind. Part 5, Practicing Mind Training Part 5. Practicing mind training. Jung once said, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." And training the mind is the process of letting your roots sink deep into reality where there is pain, friction, and limitation, so that your trunken branches can reach the heights of awareness. There are no shortcuts, no magic secrets, only persistent, steadfast practice and daily wakefulness. The first step in training the mind is to observe yourself without judgment. This is the foundation of all inner development, and it is what most of us fail